back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Rusty Mansell with us. Kip Adams is floating around here somewhere. He'll probably pop in probably as I'm in mid-sentence. But the spring is almost over, Rusty. We are getting ready. We're talking to you live on Friday just afternoon. We're closing in on GDay on Saturday, and what will be a pretty busy day for us as the black team and the red team take each other on, and we close out the 15th and final practice for Georgia this spring. Rusty, how is this Friday treating you as we get a little bit closer to a little bit of football tomorrow afternoon?
Yeah, a lot of spring games. I actually watched a little bit of the Florida game last night, and I mean, it shouldn't surprise me, but Lane Kiffin's tweet, I mean, this guy, he has no filter. Tweeting at Florida, it was 7-7 in the fourth quarter, and he kind of gave the fire emoji, and it kind of stirred up stuff. But a lot of spring games tomorrow. With me, I always say my mind frame is, okay, spring practice is over. Then you transition really quick into coaches getting on the road. And then you start talking about spring practice around the country, specifically in Georgia. So it goes really quick for me, like from this spring game to spring practice to where the coaches are, who they see, during that spring evaluation period is what I think you can really tell who they like and kind of, who they're really interested in.
Yeah, I think we're going to get lucky as far as the weather, which, man, it's a good thing GDay was on Saturday because Thursday and Friday here in Athens have been very rainy, very damp. Saturday looks, yeah.
Or last week. I mean, can you imagine they played in Augusta in that thing, but Kirby Smart would have been through the roof had they had to play a spring game in cold and rain, on GDay.
Yeah, they got very, very lucky with when this fell. So this podcast is going to be a mailbag before GDay. Answer your questions. Pulled several off the board. If you're watching this live, drop a question in the comments. We're going to try to get to those as well. But before we start with the questions, Rusty, you posted this morning on Dogs 247 just about some of the people we're expecting in town. Just give us a little overview of what you're expecting as far as visitors that'll be on hand for GDay.
It's a little different than it was, back when Kirby did 93K Day, because it was I always remember the quote from DeAndre Swift. He was a junior coming out from Philadelphia. It was like, man, I basically committed that day after I saw how important it was and a big deal. So there's a lot of different things going on now. Some of these kids run track. There's a huge 7-on-7, a big national event in Orlando, Florida. There's spring games all over. But I think when you look at it, the headliner's got to be, for me, is KJ. And I'll go ahead and give you a couple of names. You can go and get the list on Dogs 247. I think we're up to 30 or 40 kids. And I like to list kids that has a UGA offer or I know is a major target. But you look at Daniel Calhoun, the 2024 offensive lineman from Walton High School, big 6'6", 350-pound prospect. You look at KJ Bolden. It's a kid I met when he was a freshman at Buford. And I know the thought process is Georgia don't get Buford kids, but KJ Bolden is somebody that Kirby Smart has personally recruited for 3 years now, and he is a special athlete. He will be in Athens tomorrow with his mother, and they've made multiple visits there. He's going to take his visits in June, but I like where Georgia sits right now. Not saying this is a done deal at all, but I think Fran Brown, Will Muschamp, Kirby Smart, Dale McGee. I mean, they have been, when I say all in on a prospect, a 5-star kid, this is he loves to compete. He's a big-time track athlete. He can play either side of the ball. I think long-term defensive back for him, but could play wide receiver and not skip a beat. So there's going to be some big-time prospects there. Peyton Woodyard will be here from California, the defensive back commit. So a lot of names there. We get questions about Dylan Raiola. Dylan Raiola will not be here. He's not going to the Nebraska spring game. He's not going to the Oregon spring game. He has kind of shut his visits down, and he has an official set for Georgia in June right now. He doesn't have any other set. We'll see if he does, but I always get the question on him. When do I think he'll commit by? And don't really have a set date. I don't think it gets into July. I think he wants to get this thing over with where he can concentrate on his senior season and recruit to the school he chooses.
Speaking of people who love to compete, we're going to bring in Kip Adams here. Kip, glad to get the camera there working. How is this Friday treating you before, we got a little bit less, or I guess a little bit over a day before we're back in Sanford Stadium again?
It's never easy, guys. It's never easy. I had to overcome some adversity there, but I'm stronger for it. and ready to get out there, man. The weather looks like it's going to hold up pretty well right now, and so let's learn some stuff. Watching a spring game on Thursday night was I'll never get used to that. I guess in the SEC you got to do whatever you can to stand out, but we're running out of spring games here, so I'm starting to get a little worried. I don't want to think about that time of the year where we don't have any football going on, but ready to see what we can learn about Georgia tomorrow.
Yeah, that period of time becomes the waiting for Athlon and Phil Steele for me, and all those other Lindy's waiting for them to come out.
That's beach reading that Memorial Day weekend when you get those. When that Lindy's comes out, it's real. I can't get to it right now, but on my bookcase over there, I've got an embarrassing stack of Lindy's all the way. I looked the other day, 92, I think, with Garrison Hurst. So Lindy's has been my go-to for years.
I very similarly, Rusty. I'm looking at a pile of Phil Steele's that goes back to 2004.
Yeah,
Pollock was on one of those, so it's going back a ways. Well, going into some of these questions that you guys had, and like I said, if you're watching this live, drop some in the comments. We'll get to those as well. I thought this was a really interesting one from Raoul's Dog 10, who asked, will the team that takes the field Saturday be Kirby's most complete team since he's come to Athens? I'll start with you, Rusty, and then Kipp, you can jump in. Just where do you think this team stands as far as any obvious weaknesses and how it compares to some of these past teams for Kirby?
It's hard to say, man, because they've had some damn good teams. They've been stronger on defensive side a couple of times than offense. I felt like this is how I answer people when they ask me about Kirby Smart. Same way I answer about recruiting. Georgia's always going to be a threat to have the number one class, whether they get it or not. I feel comfortable in saying it's going to be a top 3, top 4, always under Kirby Smart. And what I see right now out of Georgia, they're always going to be a threat for game 15. Now, may not win it, but I feel confident that Georgia is going to have an opportunity to be there in the end. This roster is deep. We'll see what comes up here. This opening portal, they lose some depth somewhere. There's going to be some players leave, period. I mean, that's a guarantee. Who is? I don't know. And but there'll be some quality players probably off this roster here in 1 or 2 weeks. So we'll see where they are depth wise. But as far as Georgia's most complete team, I don't know that it is, but I'm confident in saying with their schedule and what I know of them right now, they are a real threat to be in that final game again.
Kipp, what's your take on if this is the most complete team?
Well, as far as roster depth across the board, sure. I mean, just increasing the overall talent level. But, for me to say that this team has a higher ceiling as far as their ability to come out and dominate other teams, sure. And the schedule looks pretty favorable as well. But the floor of a football team is still going to be at quarterback play. And you can't sit here and say we know exactly what Georgia has at the position. I know fans have been waiting to see these 3 quarterbacks for a long time, but they're coming off of, you don't understand how well Stetson Bennett played for Georgia. The man got to New York for a reason. One of the most incredible performances and maybe the best postseason play of a quarterback, in the college football playoff era, but then, going back to the BCS era. Just the way he raised the level of his play is something that, Georgia needs to appreciate and might miss at some point. So I think for you to say this is the most complete team, you can't know that for sure. Offensive line, wide receiver, the pass catchers, sure. Like the talent and the depth are as good as it's ever been. The linebacker room, the talent there is, incredible, off the charts. What the upside, but also just the returning experience as well. You got great players in the secondary as well. So I think the depth for sure. The defense, I don't think we're at the point right now where you just mark them down. Saying top 5 on the defensive side of the ball. I know Kirby would never admit to that, but I'm just saying we've seen enough under Kirby Smart to know that top 5 is probably the floor, and we're probably underrated them. Last year we kind of did. We thought they'd take a small step back, and it was the smallest of steps, if any. They got better in some ways last year on the defensive side of the ball. So, I think we usually go into a season thinking, they're probably going to be pretty good, but it's tough to really find out how good this team is until later in the year. And it's just goes to show the roster, like Rusty said, that Kirby Smart's built. There will be some challenges, and going undefeated in the regular season like they just did is incredibly difficult. And sure, it's difficult to do 2 years in a row, but the roster's built to do that, and the schedule looks favorable. So it's, we're going to have to figure it out just based on, what Georgia is not able to do on a weekly basis.
Keep in mind tomorrow when you're watching this game, and we're all reporting on the game, that Michael Williams, a 5-star, is not playing. Marvin Jones Jr., a 5-star, is not playing. Jalen Walker, a 5-star, is not playing. So you keep in mind how deep Georgia is, and they have 3 of the best prospects in the country in their particular classes that will not be on the field tomorrow. So you throw those names in there with this group, and it's like Kip said, it's deep.
No doubt about it. And I kind of leaned with Kipp on that, and Russ, you hit on that as well. As far as that question, I feel like if there was a proven quarterback coming back, maybe you make that argument about how deep this team is. The question at quarterback, I just don't think you can ignore that. A question that's kind of looking big picture, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to keep this in mind watching Georgia back on the field. Mr. Medium Rare asks, Georgia three-peats if blank happens in 2023. I'll start with you, Kipp. What do you think it will take for Georgia to be in a position that has never happened before in the college football playoff era if they were able to go through and win a 3rd straight national title?
If they have the same starting quarterback that starts game 1 at the end of the season, I like their chances. And that's not just quality play, that's just also health. I mean, we saw with Ohio State, they won a national championship with a 3rd-string quarterback coming in there, making multiple changes there late in the season. They were able to do it. But, if your starter game 1 is your starter game 15, and things probably went, the way you wanted them to. And so that guy has to know not to turn the ball over. And so if a quarterback change is made not due to injury, things probably didn't go the way Georgia fans wanted them to this season.
Rusty, what's your take on that question? What needs to happen for Georgia to have a chance to do something that hasn't been done in the sport since Minnesota did it in the 30s?
Continue to play good in big games. I mean, Kip touched on it. Stetson Bennett was good. I mean, Georgia had to answer the bell a couple of times against Ohio State. They were down. They had to answer the bell. They got down against Alabama in the national championship in 2022. Stetson Bennett was 7 for 7. Keely Ringo makes a pick. They scored 3 touchdowns there at the end. Brock Bowers, you can go on. I don't think people talk enough about the play Brock Bowers made against Ohio State when he stretched out. Like, I don't know how a human being could do that and convert that 4th down to get a 1st down. So when I say I'm not so much focused on individual stuff, I'm focused on, can Georgia keep this thing? You look at Tennessee. Actually, I went back and watched the Tennessee game last night, and for most part of it, and Georgia has played their best in the biggest games. They didn't play great against Missouri. They didn't play great against Kentucky and all these things. And people, pick those games apart. But when Georgia is on the biggest stage the last 2 years, they've played their best, minus that SEC championship game against Alabama when they got ran out of the building. And, Kirby said they used that to come back. So, but you look at this Georgia team, this locker room, there's still some kids left, what they're building culture-wise. If Georgia continues to play their biggest games, they're going to have another chance in game 15.
We'll take a quick break, come back, and answer some more questions. Welcome back, everybody. Well, this is an interesting question on the offensive line, and I'll rattle off these letters. B4321560. That was a very original username there. why are they keeping Amari Mims at right tackle rather than moving him to left tackle? Rusty, what sort of the insider or the thinking that you think is the reason they left him where he was playing last season rather than moving him to left tackle, that blindside spot?
Just comfort there, and obviously, I think they feel, he's had a lot of reps there, and that would tell me they feel comfortable in a potential. Is it Austin Blasky, or is it Ernest Green? Those guys, they feel comfortable. One of those two. I do think that Amari Mims will get some reps as a backup, maybe if things don't go well, he could slide over there. But I think people look at that left tackle position. It's not so much the transition like the NFL. These left and right tackles in college, it's kind of it's not so much of a difference the way these offenses and how fast you get the ball out and all that kind of stuff. So he could play some left tackle, but it's obvious to me he's probably more comfortable there at right tackle, and why mess that up?
Yeah, it makes sense. And in the case that Ernest Green were to win that job, that's where they were working with the second team last year. So that at least there'd be a little bit of experience with him on that side and Mims on the other side. I'll answer the next question just because I have had the heads up since I put these questions in here. You guys can think about your answers for this. 311 Bruja asks, the 4 best teams in the SEC for 2023 are, and I'll go through mine. 1, I still think is Georgia. I think obviously they won the last 2 national titles, got a really good chance at a third, though they will have work to do. I still think I'm putting Alabama number 2, even though they did not win the West last year. I think they've still got a lot of talent. They've got to figure out the quarterback situation, but I think they're in good shape there. 3, I'm going to say LSU. I think that they're going to push Alabama for a chance to win the West and have an opportunity to go back to Atlanta for the second straight year. And then my 4th team, I've kind of been going back and forth, but I really have a good feeling right now about South Carolina. I kind of go between South Carolina and Tennessee, but I'm leaning South Carolina. I think having Spencer Rattler back, I think they ended the season with some momentum, having beaten Tennessee. So I think it's a toss-up, but I like what Shane Beamer and those guys have been doing, and I would put South Carolina at 4.
I'll go with South Carolina. You look at how they finished, and it's almost kind of reminds me how Arkansas finished 2 years ago to get to that 9th game. They beat Penn State in the bowl game. They had everything popping, and things didn't turn out the way, quarterback came back, didn't turn out the way the next year kind of people anticipated. So I'm not saying South Carolina's going to take 3 steps back, but they do go to, I believe they go to Tennessee this year. I think they go to Missouri. They got a pretty good home schedule for them. They go to Georgia, obviously. So I think they're going to take a step forward. I'm not sure they're going to take a step into the top 4. I would go definitely Georgia, Alabama, LSU. To me, I want to see, is Tennessee going to continue to take that? They got to replace some guys offensively, but I do think their offense is so unique, and they got a guy that's, comfortable in there, look good in the bowl game. So I want to see if Tennessee can, take that step forward. Everybody overanalyzed Florida last night, but I'll be honest with you, I didn't give you warm and fuzzies for what they've got. So, and Billy Napier basically says, look, we're looking for a quarterback in the portal. So you come out of spring practice and the first thing you say in a press conference is we're looking for a quarterback in the portal. So that's going to be kind of the knock there. Texas A&M, where do they go? They got all this new addition here, and obviously coaching staff, be a lot of eyes on them. They got a bunch of young kids that are back, a bunch of talented players, see what they can do with it. But I would go Georgia, Alabama, LSU, and probably Tennessee would be my number 4 right now.
Kipp, what you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think there you got tiers here, and I think Georgia right now kind of got some separation. I think just the overall, the way the roster is, us talking about, which of these quarterbacks wins the job, that's really where the floor is for Georgia. And I think overall, Alabama's built a pretty strong roster, but, they got to get better at the line of scrimmage and also in the secondary. And it's just has not been up to the standards that Nick Saban set, during their dominant phase, and they were able to, overcome that at the skill position the last couple of years. But, you got to improve overall there at the line of scrimmage to be able to consistently get, in the postseason play. And I think it gets real close after that. I thought about it, but at the end of the, if you're on a coin flip here, you go with the established quarterback. And I just think, what you saw at Jaden Daniels last year, real impressive. I mean, he was an incredible player, and coming back a fifth-year senior, usually in this conference, that means a lot. And I just think that, he was able to take care of the football last year for them. And now coming into year 2 with Brian Kelly, the sky's the limit for them. I think they will push for the SC West title again. I could easily see them in Atlanta. In Tennessee, I mean, it really is. You look at the quarterback position, is Joe Milton able to hold off the freshman there? I think the receivers, they are starting to really get into that, reload phase there at wide receiver. And what they've been able to do there is really impressive. I like the guys that they have coming back there. I think with Squirrel, Ramil Keaton, they got some guys that are really going to be able to make some big plays for them. And at that point, it kind of gets a little murky there. I think after those teams, you kind of have a pretty sizable gap. But I think they're all kind of bunched up. You got Texas A&M, you got Ole Miss, Florida, and I think Kentucky has a chance to. If Devin Leary is the answer there at quarterback, transferring from NC State, then they have a chance to make a little bit of noise and be pretty competitive there. But I definitely think you should kind of just bump them into tiers right now and know that there's that Georgia's in a really good spot right now.
I think it's going to be very interesting to watch just how it sort of shakes out, because there's no lack of talent with any of those teams we're kind of talking about in those tiers. We'll get through a few more questions. Just a general recruiting question for you, Rusty, from Kel Westbrook, who says, if you were a head coach at Georgia recruiting Georgia next year, who are your 5 must-gets in the state? Just who are some of the players that stand out to you in the state of Georgia in next year's class?
Is he talking about 2024 or 2025? So
I'm guessing I would go 2020, whichever you feel more comfortable answering.
Well, I mean, obviously you could name a couple immediately with KJ Bolden and Edric Houston, and probably Daniel Calhoun is a 2024 type kids in the state of Georgia. They've already done a really good job of getting some guys locked up. Kel says top 24. Kel, I'm gonna give you 2 bonus questions here too. On 2025, I'm telling you right now that the offensive line in 2025 is Kip's been doing this a long time with me. I don't know that I've ever seen it like this in state. And all of a sudden we have a 6'4.5", 266-pound kid named Josh Petty show up this week from Fellowship Christian in Georgia. Offered him. I found out some stuff on him. He's a state champion wrestler. He's 15 years old. So 2025, you start looking at those types of things. But you also, with 2024, in state's a little different for me because it's got to start with quarterback, and you're all in on a kid from, Arizona and Dylan Raiola. You got a kid from the Northeast and Ryan Puglisi. So with Georgia, it's such a national brand. They got a guy coming this weekend, running back from Tuscaloosa that I really, really like. So, Georgia is not – I know we talk a lot about in-state, but for me, it's such a national brand. But you've heard Kirby say it before, we're going to recruit inside out. But for me, 2 guys that Georgia, I think, and Justin Green from Mountain View is one of the most underrated players in this class. I'll tell you, I saw him as a sophomore. I saw him as a freshman. He played in the Georgia League Classic in my All-Star game that I'm involved with. He was really good. His sophomore year was not so good. I'll be honest with you. They had a coaching change. Things didn't work. His junior tape, and he got bigger. Kipp and I saw him at the Under Armour thing. I was like, I didn't even recognize him for a minute. He's gotten so much bigger. He is a perfect, for me, 5 technique. He is definitely a take at Georgia. So there's some names there, but you look at Edric Houston at Buford and you look at KJ Bolden at Buford, and I know that makes people kind of nervous because Georgia's not done well in the past with Buford kids, but I'm on record as saying they're not going 0 for 2 with those 2 guys. I think they're going to get 1. I would lean KJ Bolden to me. I think this Edric Houston deal, I think he's a perfect 5 tech, which Georgia missed on a couple of those in the last class. People that follow every day know that defensive end spot, such a vital part of this defense. So Edric Houston, I think this could come down to, call me crazy, but Might come down to Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State for a prospect out of Buford High School and see KJ Bolden. It can commit anywhere. He'll be in town tomorrow again with his mother, and expecting to be back on campus in June.
I'll tackle this last question, boys, because it's right up my alley. L. Hardy 249 asks, will the list of GDay basketball transfers and recruits be released? Well, fellas, anyone interested in this, you're in luck. I posted this on our board this morning.
I actually read that. I clicked on the link and read. I was like, look, this is some juice here from Georgia.
Yeah. It's a nice little get there. 3 transfer portal targets are going to be here for Mike White and company. Ole Miss guard Amari Abram, Illinois forward RJ Melendez, and South Florida center Russell Chewa. If I'm saying his name right, probably butchered that. But 3 really talented guys, and I think it's a good situation. All 3 different positions. I think really if they could get that USF center, that would be huge, because the biggest thing this team is lacking is size right now. I noted it in the story too. They were really successful in their GDay visitors last year. It was Terry Roberts and Matthew Alexander Moncrief who both joined the team. So it'll be something to follow. I'm not really expecting an announcement or commitments, anything like that right away. But I think it is very wise for them to get those guys on campus and try to get them around that football atmosphere and try to get them excited about being in Athens.
Who went into portal from Florida State? The kid from Pace, Matthew.
What is his name? I know you're talking about. There's a lot of excitement about him, and a lot of people are after him.
That would be a monster. Yeah, he's going to be a very highly recruited player. But I could tell from Georgia, Terrence Edwards tweeting at him, and some guys I know at Pace Academy were saying this guy is the real deal. So Georgia might wind up being a Georgia Tech battle for him.
Yeah, Matthew Cleveland, very, very talented basketball player.
Mm-hmm.
Before we wrap up this episode, go to each of you, and I'll start with Kipp. What is the one thing you want to see out of GDay? What is the thing that, as you cover this team, if you see this, you think, okay, it was a pretty successful GDay for Georgia?
Less than 3 turnovers. I think if Georgia's offense is able to take care of the football, regardless of who's at quarterback, make good decisions with the football, and then these young backs hold on to the ball. Don't let it get stripped out between the tackles or trying to get a couple extra yards. You got some youth in there that you're trying to mix in, especially in the backfield, but at the quarterback position, I know that the last quarterback, he was a gunslinger and he would take some chances, and you remember those plays where you're like, what is he thinking? And then, he definitely made the big plays and needed him to. But I think right now, you'd love to see, these quarterbacks making good decisions and these running backs just, again, hold on the ball.
I don't think Stetson was ever great in a spring game, just to note. Like every spring, we're like, whoa, dude. So I piggyback that a little bit with Kipp. No turnovers, no injuries. I want to see Dominic Lovett, Ra Thomas, the new guys, see what they got. There'll be so much. Every single throw by the quarterbacks will be video, talked about, all this. I will remind everyone, this is very, very scripted, what you're going to see on Saturday. They're not going to send blitzes on some plays. They want those quarterbacks to see what they can do. They want to give some stuff to the fans, to throw it around a little bit. Unfortunately, we don't get to see those 2 scrimmages they had in the spring. That's where they really did some stuff and found out who's got what. So you will definitely get to see some things on Saturday, but I caution everybody not to fly off the deep end if you don't see something crazy tomorrow, because everything will be very, very scripted, and they will not show a ton tomorrow, especially defensively on their stunts and those types of things.
I've mentioned it before, and I'll throw it out again. I will pay whatever amount of money to the charity of Mike Bobo's Choice if they line up there in fullback, maybe even break out Maryland Eye or something.
Bowers at fullback, first play.
Yeah, don't do that to me. I don't know if the message board can handle that. So, Jamie Walker, good point there, Jamie. Shout out to UGA. Boom. Getting his collar tomorrow, that's a big deal. And that man's got a lot to live up to following Q to go into his first spring game.
No doubt about it. Well, we will have that all covered, have updates on what goes on at GDay, and do our best too to pass along anything we hear on those basketball recruits, as well as the Georgia recruits that are going to be on hand. But going to be a very busy day, but a nice way to close out spring ball. So we're going to wrap up this episode. Appreciate Rusty and Kipp popping on. Appreciate everybody who listened to this live, is checking it out after the fact. We could not do this without y'all's support. Do want to make sure and mention we got a 50% off deal right now at Dogs247. So come on, because there's going to be all kinds of notes and nuggets out of these next few days. And then, once they walk off the field in Sanford Stadium, it kind of turns the attention back to the recruiting trail and doing that and getting ready for it's going to be a busy summer. And before we know it, we're going to be in Nashville for SEC Media Days again. So on that note, we will end this episode. Thanks, everybody, for checking it out. And until next time, take care.